Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm excited. I'm using my phone, so this might be a little bit awkward, but I am interviewing Asha, the author of 50 Words for Rain today. I'm excited. You get to see what the book is about. You get to know her as a person too. I loved her and I loved our conversation. So without anything else to do, let's watch it. Asha, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for accepting. Honestly, I'm so happy that you said yes because I have so many questions. This book
Oh,
is so
of course.
good.
I'm so.
I actually. So congratulations. Let me just start there.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. Honestly, because it must be challenging to write a book. Like how do you even know you have finished writing a book? That's like, I mean, if you can answer that, how do you know you were finished writing the book?
Um, I think I always knew how I wanted it to end, but I just it's never really finished, okay? Because there's always something you can change. There's always something you can revise. So once I wrote the last chapter, it was finished, but then I revised it, 5, 6, 7 times. So it wasn't really finished, and even the published version, like, there was still a couple of little mistakes that got in there that are going to be edited out before the paperback comes out on June 8th, just like some typos and stuff like that. So there's always more that can be done, but you also have to know when to walk away.
That's true. And that's like life advice for everything in life. So
Yeah.
that's true.
Oh,
But
Aslan.
before I ask you more questions, can you tell us a little bit about the book, what the book is about, how it unfolds?
So the book is a historical fiction coming of age novel about Nori, who's a young mixed race girl growing up in post World War II American occupied Japan. She is abandoned by her mother when she's only 8, and she's left in the care of her maternal grandparents, who are a very powerful, formerly aristocratic family, adjusting to the fact that the monarchy is no longer what it was, and that they're becoming ordinary, um, relatively speaking. And they don't like that, and they don't like her. And they confine her to one room in the house, and they don't let her out. And
The famous attic.
yes, and so they keep her there, and they just really deny this girl a chance to be part of the family. And it's not until the arrival of her older half brother, Akira, that Nori is given an opportunity to belong and to have a bond with anyone.
Yeah, I honestly, as I said at the beginning, I have so many questions. I think the story, it's very unique. Um, First of all, we see this, I guess we could say, love story between a sister and a brother, half sister and half brother. I've never read anything like it before. Um, and it touched me because Akira comes into Nori's life to kind of help her out or to shape things up a little bit and allow her to have, I guess, more enjoyment in that house. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you is why do you choose to write about Nori? I think this is something you worked on when you were like 16, I've heard. So
Yeah,
why did the story popped up? How?
that's when I started it. Um, that's definitely when I started it. I think that I didn't write very much of it when I was 16. I only wrote 3 chapters, and then I didn't come back to it until I was 22. So, but I never stopped thinking about her. I did a lot of growing up during those years, and I thought about it. I spent a lot of time working on it. Um, and I just kind of came to the conclusion that I really wanted to write about a character who we don't get to see very often in historical fiction. I love historical fiction. I read a lot of it, and it's 99.9% about white people in white countries. And I still really enjoy the books. There's not a problem with that, but I just wanted something different. I wanted a protagonist who I could relate to more, as a woman of color, and I also wanted a setting that we don't get every day.
Yeah. Well, I love that you say that, because it's true. I also love to read a lot of historical books, and that was the first time I think that I got to read, about a woman of color, or girl, because we start with Nori, as an 8 years old, and then we see her grow into a full woman. But it's one of those things I really like, because I mean, the book can be seen as controversial just because it has so many things that have happened and nobody talks about, which is exactly what makes it so perfect. Honestly, it's amazing. I have to be honest. One thing I didn't know, and it might be embarrassing, and I wanted to ask you if that happened. So we see in some scenes that she needs to bath with chemicals because she needs to get lighter. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I didn't know people used to do that if they did, and that was mind blowing to me when I was reading that. I was like, whoa, this is too much. This is too
People
much.
still do that. People still use skin lightening products all over the world. It's $1 million industry.
Goodness, that's crazy.
There's
Like living under a rock.
so they well, there's a thing called colorism, and it's pretty much everywhere amongst people of color, where darker skinned people are like treated worse than lighter skinned people. They're not viewed as attractive, and it's also a class thing because historically, if you had lighter skin, you were of a higher social status because it meant that you didn't work outside. You didn't do manual labor. You got to sit inside and have servants do manual labor for you. So that's part of where it comes from. And then also colonialism. Europeans went around to a bunch of other countries and imposed their ideals of beauty onto uh, whoever was already living there. And part of that is Europeans have lighter skin. So it became ingrained in people of color that you wanted to have lighter skin. I mean, it's everywhere still. In India, there's a very famous cream called Fair and Lovely.
Hmm.
There's a lot of whitening products. I use Korean skincare products are great, but I have to read the labels 3 times because a lot of them contain brightening, aka whitening, ingredients. And then in Latin America too, um, if you turn on I don't know if you ever watched telenovelas, but
Really?
have have you ever noticed that there's not a lot of darker skinned people?
Well, that's that my
But
mom,
there's
my grandma does, and you're right. Yes. I have to, because I have to admit something. I told you I speak Spanish. I'm from Venezuela, and in there, I'm from a very small town. It was supposed to be a city, but it's like a town. And people used to call me either black or whatever, and I didn't mind. I liked it because it meant I love my skin color, and I know there are people who are darker than me, but I love people calling me like that. And we used to call each other like that, right? And if you were super white, we'll call you pote de leche, which means like milk, something like that, a milk pot. And we just we didn't see it as something wrong. We always got along with each other, and I didn't see that racism in there, and at least not in my town. And when I came here to the U.S., everything just changed for me in that sense, because I have even experienced. I remember this time a guy told me, "Oh, are you from Mexico? And are you from Cuba?" And I'm like, "No, I'm from Venezuela." He said, "Oh, really? From Venezuela?" And then he said, and then I said, "Yes, I'm from Venezuela." And then he went like, "Oh, but like, oh yeah, well, I guess there are people like you, like with your color in your country. I just didn't know." I was like, "What? What is this?" I freaked out, and that happened to me recently. It never happened before, and I'm like,
welcome to
"Boy, like my what?"
welcome to America.
It's crazy. And so, but I wasn't exposed at that time. And when I came here, I was just so focusing and just trying to survive in this country. I wasn't aware of all these little things that still happen, that happen, such as the whitening thing with chemicals. I was so shocked to learn that. And I felt like she was so young and innocent. She wasn't given the right to choose what she wanted, you know?
Yeah. She
And
wasn't.
I,
she just wanted to please the people around her. She didn't understand that it wasn't about her as a person. It was about all of these factors based off decisions that other people had made, that she didn't have control over. Obviously, she was born because her mother had an affair, which is not her fault. Um, and historically, bastard children, as they were called, were not treated very well by society. They were not allowed to inherit property in a lot of different countries. They were kind of shunned. So to be illegitimate would have been a problem within her family, but to be obviously mixed race makes her life even more complicated because she can't hide that. You can't hide the color of your skin. You can move away from your family and nobody would ever know you were born out of wedlock unless you told them.
That's
Uh,
true.
but there's nothing you can do about the color of your skin.
That is true, and I wish, we continue to foster how beautiful we just all are. To me, it's so dumb to still be talking about, you know, what skin color is. It's prettier, but
I
it
agree
is
with
really nice. And I guess authors like you, are helping other people kind of see that and realize that. And with this book, I have it here, by the way. But look at what my bird did.
you.
I
Oh
I
no!
I know, trust me, I went shocked. I almost hit him. I didn't because he's super small. Obviously, I wouldn't do that. But what can I say? I was like, I'm not gonna show it because what? But it's my reality. But with books like this, we get to see more about that, and learn more, and it's also entertaining, right? Because we were reading and we come close to Nori. At least that's how I felt, to the
Yeah.
point where I can see myself even if I'm not in her position. You wrote this book so well. I couldn't put it down. It's amazing. I love it. And I also wanted to ask you, why do you choose Japan?
So my godmother is from Japan, and
Oh, okay.
we're really, really close. She's one of my favorite people, and whenever she would go to Japan, when she would come back, she would always bring me something. So I have a whole like shelf in my room full of all the stuff that she's brought me over the years. She brought me books, she brought me toys, she brought me candy. Their candy is really good. And then it started out that way when I was little. She brought me this book of Japanese fairy tales. And I just fell in love with it. And I think it was in the back of my mind when I was writing this, like the little girl kind of locked away in the by the mean grandmother, like so I think I definitely was influenced by them. But then also there's other layers to the story as well that came about when I got older and I started researching the history. And I love history. I was a history minor in college. And I also started wondering, why it's life is very unfair
Yeah.
because the things that you're judged the most on by other people would probably be your physical appearance, and
Yeah,
then you're also judged on like who your family is and where you come from.
that's true.
And who the hell gets to pick that? Nobody, right?
And
So
who cares in the first
it's
place? Why do you even? Yeah.
it but that like that's where we hang so much of our focus, and it seems so unfair.
Yeah.
And I got to thinking about it. Like, how has nobody questioned it? Like, we just kind of run with this as a global society. Um, but I'm willing to bet that a lot of people are not necessarily happy with um, with the cards they drew, the moment they were born. But that's kind of life, is we make the best of it and we try to carve out an identity for ourselves as much as possible outside of those things. But sometimes it can feel like the world just keeps pulling you back and it just wants you to be just sit in that box that you
Yes.
were assigned and just be quiet and just be happy where you're supposed to be.
Yes, I agree. You're saying so many things, and I wanted to ask you, do you think that sometimes we don't like things about ourselves, whether it's appearance or where we come from,
Yeah.
because of society itself, or do you think we're just born not liking certain stuff about ourselves?
I think there's a natural insecurity that most people probably have. I mean, look at these supermodels, who are like gorgeous and they're like, I don't like my nose, or I don't like my hair. And I'm just like, yeah, you're perfect looking. Be quiet. Um,
Yes.
but then society also has beauty standards, right? And I think it's much harder to love yourself when what society says is good or pretty is not anything that looks anything like so
Sad.
it yeah, well, it's hard. I mean, particularly the beauty standard in America really favors European white people.
Skinny, super skinny, like almost dying
So
skinny.
it's
And yeah,
changing a little bit because now everybody wants to have the body, everybody wants to have the thickness that Black and Latina women have always had. uh but still, it's not.
I with what you're saying, I want to ask you something. So you said that you had to do obviously a lot of research to write this book, especially about this whole subject. So when you got started and all until the end of your research, were there some things that shocked you about racism and how life used to be back then that you didn't know before you started doing your research?
I kind of knew, like, racism in the 40s was so common, it wasn't even really commented on. It wasn't even really called racism. It was just the way things were. And you just deal with it. I mean, obviously, it would be a little different in Japan. Japan didn't have like laws on the books the same, because Japan is an ethnically homogenous society. It's 99.9% ethnically Asian Japanese people living in Japan. So, unlike here in the United States, where obviously there are several different racial demographics, and that's why you have racism was official here, because it was on the books. It was like whites only,
Mm-hmm.
no people of color, no colored people allowed. Um, so I think that the racism Nori experiences is definitely not as society. It's not as written in stone, but it's all around her at the same time.
Yeah.
She's obviously a foreigner. Her father's foreigner, and it was still kind of xenophobic, like a lot of insular communities. And this is not to call out Japan in any
Obviously.
specific way. Like, these are things that every country could potentially be guilty of.
Of course.
And I just think that you know it's important to remember that when you're reading it. I'm not trying to paint Japan in any negative way. I love Japan. I
And I think you speak Japanese.
I do, yes.
Goodness gracious.
I'm really rusty at the moment, but I did study it for a very long time in school.
Real. Don't even ask me how to say hi because I wouldn't know. That's amazing. So why did you want to start learning? Have you traveled there? You have friends
I've
in
gotten the
there?
opportunity to travel there. I'm currently working on purchasing an apartment in Kyoto so that I can spend more time there.
Goodness, that's amazing.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Thank you.
That sounds so exciting.
I am really excited, and it's a beautiful country, and the history is fascinating, and it's all really interesting. And I've had some people kind of give me some criticism for choosing to write about Japan. And they're like, "Oh, you shouldn't write about that. You're brown. You shouldn't write about that."
The
Um,
heck?
but my response to that would be that you read historical fiction. White American authors are constantly writing about countries that they're not from. France, Germany, Poland, all of Europe, basically. And, so I don't see why it would be any different for me as a mixed race American woman to write about Japan. I don't see a difference.
And who will tell you these things? Like family members or publishers or friends?
No, 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 none of those people. Just uh, some people have questioned, you know, whether or not I should be allowed to write
Maybe.
about. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's honestly, I apologize, but that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like, so now I have to watch out for what I write, what I don't write, just because.
It's fiction. I say this all the time. If I wanted to write a book in Venezuela, the first thing I would do is I would find somebody who's from there who would be willing to help me with the book. That's
Go for it. I would love to read that if you do.
I
No,
want
I know.
I want to write about people of color in historical fiction. That's what I'm passionate about.
I love that. And we need it. We need it. As I said, I think a lot of us haven't been exposed to what has happened and what continues to happen. And I think maybe it has to do with upbringing and what you're focusing on at the moment. But I think the more we get involved, with these sort of topics, the more we're going to be able to help the world. Because at the end of the day, we live in here, our children are going to live in here, and our grandchildren, and we need to maybe not change the world, but try to make it better as much as we can,
Yeah,
construct it.
I agree. And I think that if white American authors can continue to write about all these different European countries, then I, as an American of color, I'm going to continue to write historical fiction set in non-white countries. And I'm not going to apologize for that.
No, don't. That's no. I guess I've grown fond to Nori a lot, because you know why? There's one big reason why. She goes through a lot and she's very hopeful. Why? How? I don't even know. I mean, you can't help us explain that. But she is so hopeful. She sees life in a different way, even when people are throwing stones, literal stones at her. So, with the writing process, how was the process for you? Like making her strong and throwing all of these things at her?
I think that it's just people don't appreciate the strength that it takes sometimes to just be resilient and also to maintain who you are as a person, even though the outside world is not treating you very well. There's there's strength in just resilience and being able to just keep going and keep being a good person in an ugly world. It's not the easiest thing to do, and people don't appreciate it enough. We think of strength, we think of fighting. Um, but fighting can be insular, it can be quiet. Fighting can just be the little things that you do every day to keep your head above water. And I think that's what Nori does. I think we could all learn from her.
I love that. That is so true. That is so true. And I see this point. I think she kind of breaks a little bit when she is out of that horrible place where she was gonna be sold and all of these things, and she thinks about killing herself. That's a point. I cried when I read that part. I cried because I was like, wait, don't do this. You're strong. You're my strength. Don't kill yourself. You're like, don't do this. And we see that point that I think everybody hits at some point, like I've had enough. I'm done. So
Yeah,
how was that for you?
I don't think she really wanted to die. I just think
Oh,
she felt trapped and she didn't know what else to do. A lot of
interesting.
suicide attempts are, you know, it's not necessarily that you want to die, it's just that you don't want this. Whatever this is, you don't want to do it anymore. Um, I think in Nori's case, she thinks she's about to be like a concubine for some rich old creep, and I think she lived her whole life in captivity, really, and then she had that brief moment of happiness with her brother, and then it was taken away from her, and I don't think she wants to live the rest of her life um,
Without him.
without
Well, without
him and without being free.
him.
So I think it's desperation, but I'm obviously very glad she did not die, and that
Yes, me too. And I hope, honestly, like I'll pray for it. Like you have a sequel of this book because
Oh,
there
God.
are no Asha. You have to admit there are so many answers we want. We want answers.
There are some hanging threads, but you know what? I honestly I did not write this with the intention to write a sequel.
Okay.
I didn't. I didn't. I just happen to favor endings that leave some things to the imagination.
And you know what? The greatest literature pieces never has sequels to these sort of books. And you're always wondering. So I guess we'll have to give this one up for now. Because honestly, like I have a question. At the end, everyone hated the end in a good way. In a good way. Because
In
they
a good
still
way,
loved.
I don't know.
Yes, in a good way. You know why? Because we wanted more, right? That's the only reason why we hate it. But I see something that because when you finish a book and everything is perfect, you close it and you're like, hey, okay, great. But that's not real life, right? Life doesn't end in happiness all the time. Real life, it's what happens to Nori, and her story has an ending. She's still young now. I see her, and we might see her because I've read this in some comments. We see her turning into her grandmother. I don't think she's turning into her grandmother. I just think she might understand where she was coming from, but we
Yeah,
kind of might have that perception and not. It's like,
I agree with you. I really disagree with the notion that she's becoming her grandmother. Just because she's taking her position, it doesn't mean that she's becoming her. She's still her. She still has had the life experience that she's had. She's not going to turn into her grandmother. She just is up there fundamentally totally different people. And they've been shaped by totally different things. They're different cultures, different generations, different, positions of privilege or lack thereof. Totally different. I do think she might start to understand her grandmother a little bit more. And her grandmother actually says that to her. You'll understand me more after I'm dead.
design. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and you know, I love that so much. I have family members who might seem to be rude and heartless. And people ask me, other family members, why do you get along with this person? How can you? And I just try to explain. You never know what these people went through, why they're the way they are. You have to try to understand where they're coming from and try to help them out if you wish. And I kind of see some of that happening. Like, she's not going to turn to her grandmother, and this family member of Nori, it's her grandmother, so it's very close to her. But she might be able to understand, okay, it's not your fault. Like, you were born with a certain upbringing. You did things that it's magical. The relationship she has with every, including her mom, even though we see how she abandons her, it's magical too. Why? Let me ask you that too. Why is her mom abandoning her? Does she want something better for her instead of what people think is just, I don't want you anymore?
I think that's a complicated answer.
Okay.
My theory is that Nori's mother can't take care of her anymore, mentally and perhaps financially.
Mm-hmm.
She's not, she doesn't work. A lot of women in Japan at this time, a lot of women across the world in the 40s did not have jobs. They were wives and they were mothers. They didn't work outside the home. And I think she obviously took some money with her when she ran away, but it's been 8 years. It's quite possible she's run out. Um,
But we don't know what happened to her either.
I don't know. And then I also think she knows that Nori's not going to have a great life with the grandparents because they weren't even very nice to her, and she was there.
Exactly.
She was their, fully legitimate, fully, Japanese daughter, and just they're just not the nicest people. Her parents.
So
So
it's complicated. It's complicated.
complicated.
You don't
I think she
understand it yet.
also feels like, where else is she going to leave her? She can't just drop her off in an orphanage.
Yeah.
At least she knows if she leaves them. This is also a time when a lot of people are struggling financially. So if she knows if she leaves Nori with her parents, at the very least, they will be able to care for her needs as far as food, shelter, clothing, etc. But
And
they'll
they
never
did.
love her.
What exactly? They did, and I remember these scenes where her grandmother would give her some new dresses every now and then, and she would get so excited.
She'd
And it
be so
was so,
happy. Yeah.
I know it was so cute. So Asha, honestly, I love this book. It's so good. But I want to ask you again a little bit more about your writing process because, well, I think all readers, no, I wouldn't say all readers, but most readers like to write too, right? Or a good portion of readers like to write too. And seeing you so young and now with this wonderful book out, it's like, what? How do you set goals to write, and how was that gap in between years when you started writing and then stopped? Tell us a little bit more about that.
I just always know that I want to finish it, and I never expected this to be received the way it has been. It's been really overwhelming and nice. I'm really enjoying the all of it. You know, I get messages from people who are like, "Thank you so much for writing this. You really touched me." I've never been able to relate to a character so much in historical fiction. I've never been seen. I got a message from a girl who's half Chinese, and her white family never they used to make fun of her eyes, and tell her to open your eyes wider, you won't be able to see us, and like horrible comments like that. And just to know that I touched people. I actually am really good friends now with a girl whose mother is Japanese and her father's a black soldier, and they met in during Vietnam.
What?
Yeah,
That's amazing.
and she was like, I thank you so much for writing this book. Like this just touched me
Wow.
on a level. And I just never thought that this would happen, and I've got to meet Malala, and like it's just crazy.
No, I know. The reason why I got into this book is because I joined her book club,
Yeah.
literary club, and I was like, this girl must be just screaming, yelling, celebrating that Malala picked her book. How do you feel about that? Do you know what that means?
I started to cry. I really did. I was like crying. I just couldn't believe it. Like little old me. Like this is crazy. I used to get picked on in school so badly. And
Really?
yes, so bad. I had no friends. I was miserable. And I never thought that, and like when I started working, like I wasn't doing that well. I couldn't find a job that I was good at and that I liked and that paid me enough money to eat anything other than ramen noodles. And I just felt like I wasn't finding my place. And then I wrote this book about a girl who also couldn't find her place, and it resonated with so many people. And now I have a life that I couldn't have really dreamed of. So it's just been really special.
That's amazing. That's these are the type of stories I love to hear about and learn about because it's so inspiring. Honestly, I think you touch in a very sensitive point for a lot of people, including myself, because you start growing up, and then you start seeing how everybody fits in their whole, worlds, but you don't feel. I wouldn't say comfortable because I don't want to be ungrateful or anything, but we want to find that one place where we feel 100% at least like accomplished and feeling like happy with where you are, or at least accomplishing your dreams. And the fact that you said that is like, we can get there. We just need to keep pushing forward and we will get
Yeah,
somewhere where
you
we
can't give up, and you have to keep going, and you can't let nobody knows you. You have to remember that. Like people see, like, look, people talk about me like they know me, based off of, I think my biography was like a paragraph. So you have one paragraph of information and a picture, and you're off, like, you know talking about me like you've got any clue. And that's life, right? We make assumptions about people. We make split-second assumptions about people. And you have to remember that who you are is something that you know, and maybe very few people who you trust know. And the rest of it is just noise. So,
That
right?
love
Sing,
that.
jump up and down, do whatever it is that you feel like you were put on this earth to do to make the people around you just a little bit happier and a little bit more compassionate. And
That's beautiful.
you're
Honestly,
fine.
thank you for that. That's beautiful. And our time is almost up, and I have one last question for you. But before I ask the question, again, thank you. As a reader, what books would you recommend us for 2021?
Okay, so I recommend White Ivy by Susie Yang. Love the book, love the person who wrote it. She's a doll. I also really recommend let's see. Oh, The Henna Artist by Alka Joshi. It's so good. And yay for Southeast Asian representation. It was a Reese book club pick. It's called The Henna Artist. It's amazing. If you like stories about women of color, and that community that women form because the society has dictated that our needs and our wants are not as important as the needs and wants of men, you will really enjoy the book. And
I
then
love-
I also recommend, if you haven't read it yet, and almost everyone has, is Where the Crawdads Sing.
I haven't.
Oh my gosh. It's coming out of paperback now, so you really don't have an excuse. It's so good.
And I'll let you know how it goes. Asha, thank you so much for your time. I need to go back to meetings and work. I'm like,
Okay. You enjoy that. Have a good day. It was nice
you
to
too.
meet you.
Same. Thank you so much.
Of
Bye,
course.
Asha. See
Bye.
you. All right, everyone. So that was it. I had such an amazing time with her. Um, I learned so much. I feel like she is so wise and so raw. Her life advice were awesome. I thought I was gonna talk more about the book, but I also love like talking about the author's life and stuff. Like I want to get to know them as a person. Um, and I feel like today I got that so much that I love human connections. I guess that's what we just leave it like that. But thank you so much for watching this video, you guys. If you have any questions for her, send it to me. Maybe I can get her to answer some of the questions later. And yes, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel for more videos like this, and you can comment who the next author should be. I should be interviewing another author soon, and I want to know what you want to see. So have a great day. Bye.